But 45-10 the victory for Arkansas. Georgia Southern looks ahead to the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns on Hall of Fame weekend. Also Teacher Appreciation Weekend in Statesboro. 6 o'clock kickoff between Georgia Southern and the Ragin Cajuns. We'll be on the air with the Cutwater Tailgate Show beginning at 4 o'clock from the back of the tailgate lot. And when you look at this Louisiana team coming off a victory last Thursday against Ohio, 49-14, that was a game that, and Craig Melanson and I talked about it on their We're Talking podcast earlier on today, that seemed like a game that Louisiana needed after a tough loss to Texas, at Texas, who was numbered 19 in the country at the time, 38-13, then just squeaking by Nichols 27-24 in week 2. It seemed like they needed that dominant victory over Ohio to kind of get themselves back. Okay, this is what Cajun football is.
It was the That's More Like It game. And to be honest, that's what Georgia Southern needs on Saturday. And I hate the phrase must win because every game's must win.
Yeah.
You don't go into a week saying, okay, we don't need this one like we needed last one. Yeah, this one's not
one's okay.
No, I hate that phrase. Every game is a must win, but Georgia Southern is in dire need of a That's More Like It game.
Yeah.
On the flip side for the Cajuns, had a chance to watch that entire game on Thursday. Ohio is a little bit down, but the Cajuns did what they do best, smash-mouth running game, efficient passing game, and a turnover-forcing defense. They forced 7 giveaways already those first 3 games, but offensively, they've back to their 3-headed monster at running back. You take away Mitchell, you take away Regis, who are now in the NFL, but it's Smith, it's Bailey, it's the freshman Montreal Johnson, who
I'm a big fan of.
Had 4 touchdowns. True freshman. Nobody had ever done that in Cajun history, but he runs for 84 yards and 4 scores. The quarterback, though, Levi Lewis, Terry loves him, and it's for good reason. Maybe Georgia could find a way to sack him because they haven't sacked him the last 2 years, but he opted to come back for his 6th year. He was 21 of 29, and according to Jay, when he was talking with Craig, of those 8 incompletions, 3 of those were drops. So, just typical Levi Lewis. He finds a way to put the ball in the money. He's not a running quarterback, but if you push him to it, he will run, as Georgia Southern saw a couple of times during the 2020 game. It's just a tough offense to stop because you know what they're going to do. A lot like Georgia Southern, you can know what they're going to do, but with that experienced offensive line and the experience at quarterback, they're just such a tough unit to stop.
Just to give you an idea of what Levi Lewis has meant, and I know everybody has seen Levi Lewis a lot more than they would want to for the senior out of Baton Rouge, expecting to make his 32nd start of his career for Louisiana, but he's 3rd in Louisiana history with over 7,000 passing yards, just 2 spots behind Jake Delhomme. He's 2nd in Louisiana history with 58 passing touchdowns in his career, just behind Jake Delhomme, which he's probably going to catch him at some point with that one.
He's going to pass him. He's also thrown a touchdown in 21 straight games. And for a team that is known for running the ball as much as they do, throw for a touchdown in 21 straight. So he's able to have that contribution there as well.
But he is somebody that is so smart with the football. And there's guys that can make up for not necessarily being the highest football IQ guy just with their legs. But he is somebody that is kind of the opposite. He is so smart, he can make up for not being necessarily the fastest guy on the field.
He just doesn't put the ball in difficult situations that much. Now, he is going to throw a pick every now and then, even though he's only thrown 15 over the course of 5 years, which is just... That's how much he values the football. Georgia Southern got him once last year. They went Tampa 2, going deep, and Raynard Ellis picked him off. But he almost looks like he toys with people because he knows how much he can run, but he's not going to unless he really has to. He's not that option, that dual threat guy. But if he needs to run, he can show you, I've got wheels. This makes you think a little bit. I'm not going to do it much, but just know that it's there. When he's dropping back, he's looking to throw. And one thing that really punches you in the face when you read about the Cajuns' offense so far, he has hit 17 different receivers in 3 games. 17!
And a big part of that, they love to use those tight ends as receivers as well. You've got 3 different guys that's a tight end that has caught a pass this year.
Yeah.
And this is an offense, and we'll talk about it a lot more when we flip over to the defensive side, because outside of the offensive line, yes, there's experience, but not as much as on the defensive side. But there's just so much experience and experience together. And there's a big difference between that, and we talk about that a little bit time and time again. But having so many different guys that have played so many snaps together under Coach Napier, who everybody didn't really think he would still be the coach of Louisiana at this point.
After the last 2 years.
5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's somebody that has really built this program into what it is, and it's making it one of those that, especially with all the crazy conference realignment crap that's going on, it's making it one of the top teams in the Sun Belt and one of the top teams in the Group of Five.
It was endearing the way he put it, why he didn't go to Auburn, why he didn't go to Baylor, Mississippi State, South Carolina, any of the major openings of the last 2 seasons, because he said there was still work to do here.
Yeah.
Somebody that you could probably pay $10 and he would just want to be a football coach. That's how much he loves ball. Dad was a coach, passed away a couple of years ago after a courageous battle with ALS. He's a North Georgia boy, Chatsworth and Murray County, where his dad coached for such a long time. Head coach, OC. He's got option in his blood. Not that the offense they run is necessarily an option. They're more of the App State ilk, where they're going to try to run the wide zone or the stretch play to work it off tackle. It all works because of the experience they have on that offensive line, and that's not having left tackle Carlos Rubio for the first 2 games of the season. Now, he did return against Ohio, but Ken Marks, who's a 7th-year senior, one of the rare 7th-year guys. There is an 8th-year guy that plays at East Tennessee State. We don't have to worry about them, though. But Shane Vallow's a former walk-on now in his 3rd year as a starter. That right side of the offensive line, it's the best right side of an offensive line in the league, and I don't mind.
Close.
I don't mind putting it that way because I think it's true. Osiris Torrance, a freshman All-American 2 years ago. He started every game since. Max Mitchell has played both tackle positions. He is outstanding on the right side. And this was an offensive line that just a couple of years ago had 2 NFL guys on it.
Yeah.
At the same time, in the Sun Belt, Dotson and Hunt at the same time on that side of the line, and now they're thriving in the professional ranks.
And you're seeing them rebuild it almost with those guys still there, and it's a lot like you saw with Hunt and the guys before them.
Yeah.
Osiris Torrance has been there. He started since he was a freshman, but he was somebody that had to kind of wait his turn a little bit. Max Mitchell, a guy that kind of had to wait his turn a little bit. Ken Marks had to wait his turn a little bit, and I mean that was about a decade ago. But there's not a whole lot of experience on the second level of that offensive line.
No,
but it's because that's the next wave that's going to be in the next 2-3 years. That's going to be the wave that we talk about. Man, these guys have been here forever.
And gift and the curse of having the COVID waiver year is that you get so much back. The guys behind them were probably thinking, I'm going to get in earlier if that waiver year didn't exist. But now they got last year, they're getting this year, so that you may have to burn a year of eligibility this year. But you got a full season's worth of reps where it didn't count against you. So when all these guys wave bye-bye after this year, slot them into those positions, and I would guess that the Cajuns are still going to be in good shape. That's whether or not Billy Napier is still the head coach by the time 22 gets here.
One other thing I want to touch on for the offense, and we touched on it a little bit, but the 3-headed monster at running back, it seems like they've got those for the last 7 years. They've had a 3-headed monster, and it's been about 17 different guys.
Just how they roll.
But Chris Smith is, quote-unquote, the number 1 guy now. You've heard about him a lot as a returner, now getting to see what he does as a back for Louisiana. Imani Bailey at the 2, and then Montreal Johnson that we talked about a little bit, had those 4 scores against Ohio. He is a load at running back and listed at just 5'11", 210. I say just.
Yeah.
5'11", 210, but he is somebody that runs so hard, and he absolutely ran over an Ohio Bobcat there in the second half.
He reminds me a lot of Elijah Mitchell. I think that he doesn't have the speed that Mitchell does, and that's why Mitchell was starting for the 49ers last week before he got hurt. But I believe that if he sticks it out, he could be one of the tops that have ever gone to Louisiana. I know Tyrell Fenroy, that was before Georgia Southern's time, but he is at the top of a lot of their rushing totals in school history. But for Johnson, in just his 3rd career game, to have a 4-touchdown contest, you want to talk about a guy who can build some early momentum and confidence, and he did it on national television.
Yeah.
He was the one that reached barely over the goal line at the end of the first half, and I believe at that point that's where that game was put away. They could have kicked a field goal because Kenny Almendaris has been really good since taking over for Nate Snyder. But to run that final play and to watch him battle for the goal line, they said he got in, whether he did or not. They said he got in. They couldn't overturn it, so he did. It was 21-7 at the half. They dominated the final 30 minutes, and that gave them that trampoline into the third and fourth quarters because of what he was able to do when given an opportunity.
When you flip it over to the defensive side, it's something we've talked about a little bit already, but there is so much experience on this defense for Louisiana. When you this is a team, it almost feels like an NFL team because you're like, okay, it's the same cast of characters on the defense for these guys.
Yeah.
To the point where their starters that they list on the 2 deep, there's only one that has less than 20 games started, and that's A.J. Riley at linebacker.
What makes this not as familiar to me is that a year ago when these two teams matched up, they had 7 defensive starters out because of COVID that game. But Talon Humphrey's been there for a while. Chris Moncrief has been there for a while. Chauncey Manac has been there for a while. Their whole secondary is back. So guys that we have heard of, but it was a year ago when they were dealing with some early season COVID issues. Georgia Southern went to Cajun Field, outplayed them, outgained them, but Nate Snyder kicks the 53-yard field goal. They walk it off with a 2-point win. It's a really good unit. They have been against the pass. Even though it seems like they're more built to stop the run, they were really good against the pass. They've struggled against the pass so far. They're 97th in the country, giving up 254 per game. Talon Humphrey, though, in the middle. Big Sauce. When your nickname's Big Sauce, you can probably do some things. And he would have done really well in Arkansas this weekend with all the Hermans we ate. But at 350 pounds, he's an NFL prospect and somebody that I highly anticipate is going to be playing on Sundays.
Yeah, he's, as Terry would say, he's a big kid. He is absolutely huge. But it's the same, and I know I keep saying it, but it's the same guys that we've talked about for what seems like 20 years. You've got Chauncey Manac, who I've pointed at his name forever, Chris Moncrief, Lorenzo McCaskill, Talon Humphreys, Percy Butler, Braylon Trahan. It's so many guys that you see time and time again, but on the flip side, you know that they've seen Georgia Southern that many times and have seen what this offense does.
You would think that the familiarity can both hurt and help, but one thing that does give the Cajuns a little bit of an edge that very few to ever come this way would possess, they've never lost a game at Paulson.
That's true. The only Georgia Southern win against the Cajuns was at Louisiana.
In 2017, when a freshman by the name of Levi Lewis got the start, played the first 3 series, looked like a freshman, he was yanked. Georgia Southern dominated that game, and it's the game that got Chad Lunsford the head coaching job.
True. I wish they would have kept Levi Lewis yanked.
But in 16, it was a Thursday night game. They came to Paulson for the first time ever. They dominated that game. Georgia Southern got a couple of late scores, but Cajuns were largely in control of that game. And then 2 years ago, the Eagles had just gotten back from Minnesota and thought they can go up there and beat a Big Ten team who would ultimately win 11 games that year. Let's see what the Eagles can do against the Cajuns. They got the ball first, went down the field in about 15 seconds and scored a touchdown. And we're, they're good.
Yeah.
And that was one of the few times that a Georgia Southern team was physically manhandled up front. How big and strong their running backs looked. They only punted once that game. And even though the Eagles stayed close with some Tyler Bass field goals, the Cajuns kept scoring touchdowns, and that's why they won that game by 2 scores.
This will be one that I think a lot of people around the conference are going to be watching just from the sheer fact of trying to figure out, is this Louisiana team what everybody thought at the beginning of the season when they were in the top 25 in the preseason? Or is it a team that is like they looked against McNeese or rather against Nichols in Texas, where it was kind of up in the air? Is Louisiana still the same Louisiana? They tried to prove that against Ohio, but like you talked about, Ohio a little bit down this year. This will be the first time that Louisiana actually gets a quote-unquote like opponent test. And I think there's going to be a lot of people around the conference and really around the country that take notice of Louisiana to see what this Cajuns team is all about.
This is one where Georgia Southern could still have its launching point. We looked at that FAU game as being a pivotal game for how it would begin a very difficult stretch of football, but this is where it's going to matter.
Yeah.
Whether it's a West team, which you've got Arkansas State the next week, so you don't get an East team until you go to Troy 3 weeks from now. But these are the games that it gets turned up to 11, to steal a really horrible pun from Spinal Tap. But these are ones where, and it's must-win is not something that you want to highlight, but it's where this week a that's more like it performance. Running the football, getting to third and short, not giving up the big pass play, sustaining drives, finishing drives.
Yeah, because, I mean, you look at it, and yes, the first 3 games haven't gone the way you want to if you're Georgia Southern at 1-2, and even the Gardner-Webb game wasn't exactly what you wanted, but everything is still on the table. You're still 0-0 in Sun Belt Conference play. You can still win the conference tournament. You can still go to a bowl game. You can still do everything that you had set out to do this year, despite what the first 3 games have looked like. If you turn it on here at Louisiana, and I know it's not, oh, you flip the switch and, oh, it's on, ready to go, but if you turn the corner and it starts here against Louisiana, there's nothing to say that this can't still be a special year for Georgia Southern.
No, because then it would be okay, you get this one, then you can look at, well, Arkansas State just got pounded by Washington 52-3. I know that they're throwing for almost a little bit. They're throwing for almost 400 yards a game with 2 quarterbacks, but defensively, not stopping anybody. And then a Troy team that, while defensively they've looked really good so far, outside of Liberty, haven't really played anybody. South Alabama, the week after on a Thursday, they're 3-0, haven't really played anybody, and they were trailing at the half to a SWAC team in Alcorn State last weekend, having to deal with the lights going out, but they did come back on long enough to get the rest of the game played, and they got that 3-0
delayed
start.
by about an hour and a half?
Yeah, there was a thought that they may not be able to finish the game because they couldn't figure out how to get the lights back on.
Good night. No pun intended.
It is that was really good. You can really adjust your train of thought just by how this weekend is going to look. And you mentioned Hall of Fame weekend. We're going to enshrine 6 people getting a chance to have the banquet in person. You didn't get to do that last year because of COVID. It's also Teacher Appreciation Weekend. And the Eagles haven't been home in 3 weeks. And I said this in postgame with Terry right before the Ford locker room wrap-up. I know that 83-16 over the last 2 weeks doesn't cut it. I know it was probably frustrating to deal with, and it was, from our standpoint, it was frustrating to talk about because you see how hard they work, and then you see it not translate to the contest. But if they run out of that inflatable from the FOC Saturday night and see that place packed and see that you're still on their side and that you haven't given up just because it's been a couple of bad performances and it's a 1-2 start, if you're there, remember how bad Paulson is for everybody else, even though the Cajuns are 2-0? Remember how difficult it is to come here and play? The reason why Georgia Southern's got the second best winning percentage at Paulson all time, it's because of Eagle Nation. If they show up, Georgia Southern will do its best to show out. Whether they do it or not, that's why we're going to be there to see it, because this is our program, and this is one we want to see succeed.
And it goes back to what we were talking about, kind of take the episode full circle of what we were talking about with Arkansas earlier. Whether they were 0-12, and they weren't 0-12, but they're pretty darn close to it a couple years.
Awful couple of years for them.
But like Chuck Barrett talked about, that's a program that you still had people at the games. You still had people looking up what the opponent was, what the opponent did, trying to know everything they can to support that program. And it doesn't matter what the record is, what it looks like, you're still there to support them because they're, in that case, the Razorbacks, in our case, Georgia Southern. I'm really going to knock this thing out before this is over with. I'm 2 for 2 on this right now.
And now look where they are, 3-0, 16th in the country, and their game in Arlington against Texas A&M is the CBS National Game of the Week this week. So they've gone from a 20-game SEC losing streak to being the National Game of the Week when Alabama's still there, LSU's still there, A&M, which they're going to play. That's a rivalry matchup. It's been in Arlington for a number of years. So they have been able to ascend to a point where they felt that they never should have left. Sam Pittman has got them in the right direction, and all it's going to take is one performance for Georgia Southern to get right back where they feel they should be.
Again, everything's still on the table for Georgia Southern this weekend. It's Georgia Southern and Louisiana. 6 o'clock kickoff for the Ragin Cajuns and the Eagles at Allen E. Paulson Stadium. We'll be on the air at 4 o'clock with the Cutwater Tailgate Show in the back of the tailgate lot. Again, Got the Hall of Fame induction ceremony that afternoon. That'll be streamed on Facebook Live, on gseagles.com, and on Georgia Southern Athletics YouTube channel, as well as Georgia Southern Sports Network YouTube channel as well. So check that out, and different announcements will be coming out in the next couple of days of when and where you can see that and get your tickets to come to Georgia Southern Louisiana and the Hall of Fame induction ceremony that afternoon. But